Hi, IB Language and Literature. You are watching a lesson on explanation and analysis. One of the number one issues that a lot of students mentioned with their previous higher level essay was the struggle that they had with explaining how their evidence supports their claim. So we're going to go through some information in this video on what explanation is and how do you do it in your essay. I'm going to be using a children's book as an example. So you can see in my camera right here, this is me. Hello, I'm talking to you, but I've got my screen reader thing going because I'm going to use this children's book to help explain how to do your explanation or your analysis in your essay. So what is explanation and analysis? Explanation and analysis ultimately answers the question, how does this evidence support my claim? It connects the dots for the reader between the quotation and the main idea, and it usually follows the evidence. Sometimes your explanation can surround the evidence, depending on how much context you need to provide for your evidence. Explanation is usually 3 to 5 sentences per piece of evidence. That seems like a lot. It is a lot. It should take up the majority of your essay. Most of your essay will be explanation. So remember that when we talk about explanation, we're talking about really the meat of your essay. Your essay starts with your introduction, where you summarize the text that you are analyzing. The last sentence of your introduction is your thesis statement. And then following your thesis statement, you jump into body paragraph 1. Each body paragraph starts with a topic sentence, and then usually following that topic sentence is your evidence with some sort of context for the evidence, what's going on in the text when this quotation shows up, and then your explanation. And your explanation or your analysis, we use those two words interchangeably. Your explanation or analysis is really the largest part of your essay because it is where your full argument comes through. How does this quotation or this paraphrase or this author choice, how does that choice build to your claim? How does it emphasize the main idea? How does it build to what the text is saying about that core concept? So remember that your explanation really should take up the most of your essay. So how do I do it? First, the question that you are always wanting to ask yourself is, what does your reader need to know to understand how this evidence supports your claim? If you can think of your reader at all times, you will become a stronger writer. Because if you put yourselves in the shoes of your reader or in the mind of your reader, then you'll be able to connect the dots clearly in a way that your reader will understand it. So we are always writing for readers. How can I make my ideas clearer so that my reader understands what I'm talking about? So what does this need then? To answer this question, oftentimes you will need definitions. What literary device or author choice are you focused on? So if your literary device that you're focused on is diction, then you might just need to add in a couple of words of word choice. Diction is the author's word choice. You don't need to have a long definition, but you will often need a definition of the author choice that you are focused on so that your reader understands what you're even talking about. So we're going to look at that in just a minute, specifically looking at the word syntax. But if you're using a metaphor, give a brief definition of a metaphor. If you're talking about the structure, you might not need to define structure. So sometimes you'll need definitions and sometimes you won't. The key thing is always asking that question, what does my reader need to know to understand how my evidence supports my claim? Context. You must provide context for the quotation. What is going on around this evidence? Especially for an essay for the IB evaluators have not read the text that you are analyzing. They have not read the piano lesson. They have not read the PSAs by Tarana Burke. They have not read The Handmaid's Tale. You have to explain or describe the context, what is going on in the story at the point that this quotation, that this piece of evidence shows up. That is necessary. What else does your reader need to know? Your reader needs to know the connections. How does this quotation or paraphrase show your claim? And this is really the hardest part, connecting those dots for the reader. And then significance. Why does this quotation matter? Why is it important to your claim? Why is it important to the text as a whole? So those are really the 4 things that you'll need to do each time you provide analysis or explanation of your evidence. You won't always need definitions, but you will always need context and connections. And then significance can sometimes be embedded in that connection as well. So let's look at this in practice. I am going to read to you a little bit from the book, Alexander and the Terrible, Horrible, No Good, Very Bad Day. So here's the book. If you are familiar with the story, Alexander is right here, and he has a terrible, horrible, no good, very bad day. I'm going to read through some of this pretty quickly so that way we can get to the part that we're going to analyze. I went to sleep with gum in my mouth, and now there's gum in my hair. And when I got out of bed this morning, I tripped on the skateboard, and by mistake, I dropped my sweater in the sink when the water was running, and I could tell it was going to be a terrible, horrible, no good, very bad day. So just from the beginning, this author, Judith Viorst, uses run-on sentences the whole time. She uses and. There are no punctuation marks here. So this is a run-on sentence. It's a grammatical error, but she does that intentionally so that we can get the voice of this young boy, because kids often speak in run-on sentences. They tack on details all the time. At breakfast, Anthony found a Corvette Stingray car kit in his breakfast cereal box, and Nick found a junior undercover agent code ring in his breakfast cereal box. But in my breakfast cereal box, all I found was breakfast cereal. I think I'll move to Australia. In the carpool, Mrs. Gibson let Becky have a seat by the window. Audrey and Elliot got seats by the window, too. I said I was being scrunched. I said I was being smushed. I said, if I don't get a seat by the window, I'm going to be car sick. No one even answered. I could tell it was going to be a terrible, horrible, no good, very bad day. So the story continues with him going to school, being disappointed because his friends don't want to be his friends anymore. He doesn't get a yummy treat in his lunchbox. And then after school, they go to the dentist. And we get to this page. After the dentist, after they find a cavity in his mouth, on the way downstairs, the elevator door closed on my foot, and while we were waiting for my mom to go get the car, Anthony made me fall where it was muddy. And then when I started crying because of the mud, Nick said I was a crybaby, and while I was punching Nick for saying crybaby, my mom came back with the car and scolded me for being muddy and fighting. I'm having a terrible, horrible, no good, very bad day, I told everybody. No one even answered. I want to focus on this page because of the author choice that is made here. So we have this long, again, run-on sentence, and the page ends with the word and. We have the picture of him stubbing his toe or shutting his toe in the elevator door. And then we have the picture of the boys shoving him into the mud, and his brother has this angry face on. But the sentence, this run-on sentence, doesn't end on this page. Instead, it continues on the next page with, while I was punching Nick for saying crybaby, my mom came back with the car and scolded me for being muddy and fighting. We have this satisfied look on his brother's face. We have him holding his brother's shirt and his mom scolding him right here. So in this page, in these 2 pages, Judith Viorst, the author, decided to cut the sentence, first of all, a run-on sentence, decided to cut it in half. And I'm going to spend some time thinking about why she cut that sentence in half. So here is my topic sentence. In Alexander and the Terrible, Horrible, No Good, Very Bad Day, Judith Viorst's syntax adds humor to the story, which ultimately builds sympathy in the reader to emphasize her main point that sometimes life is hard, even for kids. So in this topic sentence, first of all, the topic sentence is not the thesis. It is the topic sentence. So it tells the reader what that whole paragraph is going to be about. This paragraph is going to be about syntax. So that's my topic sentence. So how do I do my explanation? So I've got a lot of text here. I'm going to walk through it one piece at a time. I'm going to read the whole paragraph to you, or the whole explanation model to you, and then I'll go through each piece at a time. So we've got first my topic sentence. In Alexander and the Terrible, Horrible, No Good, Very Bad Day, Judith Viorst's syntax adds humor to the story, which ultimately builds sympathy in the reader to emphasize her main point that sometimes life is hard, even for kids. In a particular scene from Alexander, the author chooses to write a long run-on sentence describing how Alexander and his brothers get into a fight while waiting on their mom to get the car. The sentence on the first page describes how his brother pushed him into the mud. Alexander narrates, and then when I started crying because of the mud, Nick said I was a crybaby, and while I was punching Nick for saying crybaby, my mom came back with the car and scolded me for being muddy and fighting. Syntax is an author's sentence structure, how a sentence is put together. Syntax can have a deep impact on the meaning of a text. In the scene where Alexander and his brothers fight, Viorst uses a long run-on sentence that breaks in a humorous spot. On the first page, she describes the mud and pushing, making the reader sympathize with the injured Alex. However, when the reader turns the page, the run-on continues with the line, and while I was punching Nick for saying crybaby, which makes the reader laugh because punching his brother back after he was being the one punched is unexpected. The page turn adds additional sympathy because punching one's brother is a natural response. Finally, when the sentence ends with Alexander being the one in trouble with his mom, she, of course, only saw page 2 when he was muddy and fighting. The reader gets a sense of the injustice of it all, that Alexander's bad day is to be blamed, not him. Ultimately, the choice of the long run-on sentence that is split into 2 pages helps the reader sympathize with Alexander, the main character, and builds to the theme of the story, which is that sometimes people have bad days, even when one is an innocent child with a seemingly easy life. So, first, we provide context for the evidence. We have to say what page this comes from, or what's going on in the page that we're taking it from. Then we have the evidence itself with that in-text citation. So make sure that you've got that in-text citation, especially if you did not mention the author's name in the signal phrase, put the last name in the parenthetical. I provided a definition of the word syntax. It's helpful to have the definition there just to make sure that your reader's on the same page as you are. And then the explanation of the author's choices, oftentimes you're going to be verbalizing what you see the author did. Because ultimately, yes, the author did it, but you're the one who is seeing it. So you're going to describe the moves that you see in the text. So I describe how the page cuts that run-on sentence in half, and then how that page cut impacts the text. How does it impact the story itself? And what does it do? And then ultimately, the impact of that author choice comes down here. What does it do to the reader? That run-on sentence that gets cut in a humorous way helps the reader to sympathize with the main character, which ultimately is the goal of every childhood book, every children's book. The goal is to help us sympathize with the reader so that way we can make sense of our own lives as children. So this is what explanation does. It connects the dots for the reader, and there are certain moves that need to be covered every time you use explanation. So just as a reminder, when you are writing your explanation, what does your reader need to know to understand how this evidence supports your claim? That is the central question you are always asking yourself. Provide definitions where needed. Provide the context, what's going on around this quotation or in this scene. Provide those connections. How does this quotation or paraphrase show your claim? Explain how you see the author's choice in there. What moves do you see in the text? And then provide significance. What does this evidence mean for the claim? How can I connect this evidence back to my claim? And what does it mean for the text as a whole? Things to remember when you are creating your explanation or analysis in your higher level essay. Explanation is hard. It should make your brain hurt. This is where you are doing the mental gymnastics of connecting the dots for your reader. It should be hard to write. It should take up the majority of the words in your essay. Most of your essay will be your explanation. And remember to put yourself in your reader's shoes. Put yourself in your reader's mind. They cannot read your mind. So make sure that you are fully explaining your ideas to them. Now, as you are writing your higher level essay, when you have questions or when you need help, you can always ask for it. I can't help if I don't know that you need it. And remember that this should be hard. It's a hard process to write these things. So take the time that you need to write. Don't just try to cram it in class. Remember to work on your higher level essay outside of class. And I am here to support you. Ready? Get back to writing.